Now, when I saw the schedule that I had some titles. Preach on? Okay. And I saw this one, addictions. I said, I never heard of that in my life. I never preached on addictions. I mean, I know why they'd give me that topic, all right. But I never preached on addiction. That's not biblical. I said, boy, I'm going to have to, pray a little bit here and see how that's biblical, how I'm going to do that. I would like to preach on biblical things. I'm supposed to be a preacher of the Catholic faith. And so let me begin with the gospel. Let me begin by reading to you from the Gospel of John. This is probably the verse that I read maybe the most often in preaching. It's kind of a fundamental passage that I could even mark my preaching. Jesus then said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And they said to him, we are descendants of Abraham and have never been in bondage to anyone. How is it that you can say you will be made free? And Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not continue in the house forever. The Son continues forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. That's where I'm going to start my talk about addictions. I am not eminently qualified to give a talk on addictions, on addictive behavior. I am not a psychologist. I am not a substance abuse counselor. I don't have any degrees in those things. I'm not a sociologist, and I don't deal with those problems on a day-to-day basis, even pastorally, as a priest. So I am singularly unqualified to give this talk. That's the official word. Now here's the unofficial word. I've been there and done that. And from that basis, I'm a little bit qualified. Maybe not a whole lot, but a little bit. Addictions. We have addictions from one end to the other. Our country, our world, has been enslaved. Now, there are a lot of obvious addictions. People are addicted to alcohol. People are addicted to all kinds of drugs, some of them legal, some of them not legal. People are addicted to gambling. People are addicted to pornography. People are addicted to television. People are addicted to computers. People are addicted to women. People are addicted to men. People are addicted to just about anything you can imagine. What is addiction, though? Once again, I'm not qualified to give a technical talk, but you didn't come here to get you a technical talk. You came here to listen to me and see what I have to say about it, because some of you know where I've been. I was not, unfortunately, and I mean it, unfortunately, I was not one of those people who was born an altar boy, went to the seminary at the age of 14, and was good all his life, got ordained, and then was a good priest. I wish that I were such a creature. But you know very well, I was not and am not. Well, God has his plan, and it's different for every one of us. Addictions involves compulsion, involves habit, involves vice, involves that which is the opposite of a virtue, which is power. This is a talk about power. This is a talk about power and the loss of power. This is a talk about how souls good souls. All of them are good. God creates every one of them. They've got to be good, for they come from God, who is goodness itself. But this is about souls who lose their freedom. This is about good people, decent people, all of them starting out innocent, for all were once babes, who go to dark places, who go to places you maybe just don't want to know about. I have been to places you can't even fathom. I have seen things you don't ever want to see. I remember nights that were so long that eternity seemed small in comparison. I have been to places where pain is the master. Satan is the master. I have been to those places. I have been to crack houses. I have been to drug-infested inner-city bastions of evil, where souls are held captive, where they aren't free. Do you know what freedom is? I got to talk about freedom if I'm talking about addiction. Freedom is related to truth. Jesus said, if you are truly my disciples, you will abide in my word, you will obey my commandments, then you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. There is a link, an indissoluble link between truth and freedom. You've got to abide in God's word, which is the truth. That'll liberate you. What is freedom? Now, we live in a free country. We're going to have elections on Tuesday, presidential election. That's a great thing. That's a wonderful benefit we have, a blessing we have, to live in a free country. And if I ask the average person, what's freedom? The average person probably say, well, being able to do what I want to do. Sounds good? No cigar. Wrong. Because if freedom is being able to do whatever you want to do, as I've often said, I will get Barb to come up here and finish my talk. I'll go out in the parking lot and peruse this northern Michigan parking lot for a nice four-wheel drive truck, which I like, and I will drive it home to California. And I will take me some hunting and fishing excursions in it. You say, you can't do that. I said, why not? It's a free country, isn't it? Don't I have a right to go out there and choose? I have a right to choose which one I want? You trying to take away my freedom, you communists? Well, that's nonsense, you say. You can't do that. Well, worse than that, what if I had some kind of a mental lapse and I went back to about the age of 19, when the Vietnam War was going on and I was in the Army, and having just completed all my training and being an expert in small arms, one of you didn't like what I had to say. And I got out my light iron tank weapon, my law, and laid down the law and fired one right at you, and you disappeared in a cloud of blue smoke. After all, it is a free country. And freedom, isn't that being able to do whatever you want to do? No. As we've said before more than once, freedom has limits. And the limits are laid down by God. Now, a lot of people confuse freedom with license. You know the difference between freedom and license. We live in a free country. I have the freedom to choose, the right to choose, but you don't have the right to choose evil, though. Hold on. Do you have the right to choose evil? No. You have the ability to choose evil, but you don't have the moral right to choose evil. No one does. There are dire consequences in that. And they begin to confuse realities here. Freedom and license are profoundly different things. Just as I told you before about tolerance and permissiveness. They are very different things. Tolerance, yes, you must tolerate the good. A wide spectrum of goods. Anything good, we've got to tolerate it. You know, different races, different religions, different languages, all kinds of different things. They're all good. And we've got to be tolerant. You know, you may not like rock music. Now that's a bad example. You may not like Gregorian chant in church music. Shame on you. But your cup of tea may be something else. You know, you may like more contemporary Christian music. And as long as it is, in fact, good music, that's fine. Okay. Somebody's spirituality might be Franciscan. Somebody else's might be Benedictine. Somebody else's might be Carmelite. That's all good. We have to tolerate all those goods. But I don't have to tolerate evil. If I begin to, quote, tolerate evil, that isn't tolerance at all. That's permissiveness. And we live in a permissive society. The permissive parent. I'll never forget a friend of mine, my classmate, Father Tony Anderson, told me a story. His dad's a Superior Court judge in Arizona. And one time they went to visit friends of the family. And dad's a judge and his friend's a lawyer. And so the kids go in the back room while the parents are in the living room talking. And the two sons of the lawyer friend, they light up a joint and smoke some marijuana. And so my friend and his brother then said, "What are you guys doing? You can't do that. Your dad's out in the front room there. If he smells that, he's going to kill you." "Oh, no, he lets us do it." And, of course, the boys, they came and told their dad, the judge. And he went to his friend, the lawyer, and said, "Do you let your kids smoke marijuana?" And he was embarrassed by it, but he says, "Well, I want to be tolerant. I don't want to impede their joy. The only thing I can think of is my Italian grandmother, and she would have gone like this, impede their joy? I'll impede their joy." You know what that is? Tolerance? That's not tolerance. That's permissiveness. You understand the difference? And so, freedom? Yes. License? No. Now, what leads to the loss of freedom? God's created us with a free will and an intellect. They're meant to be used. But you can lose your freedom. How do you lose your freedom? By abusing your freedom. That's how you can lose your freedom. And that's good advice for an individual human being, and that's good advice for a country. You can lose your freedom by abusing your freedom. Freedom has to operate inside the circumference of the good. I choose things which are inside the parameters of the good. Once I step outside that, I go out of the light into the darkness, and I begin to lose my grip on freedom. But what is freedom if it's not being able to do what you want to do? Freedom is power. Freedom is the power to do not whatever I want to do, but to do what I ought to do. And what should I do? I ought to love God, know God, and serve God with my whole heart, mind, and strength. But you've got to be free to do that. It takes a free person, a liberated person, to do what is right and just. You've got to be free to love God. You can't be shackled and love God with your whole heart, mind, and strength. You've got to be free in order to act in accordance with right reason. Now, today, we have an age of addiction. Today, we live in a world that has been invaded by the forces of darkness. We have addictions from A to Z. We have intemperate behavior. We can't seem to control ourselves. We go off the deep end. A little bit isn't enough. We want more and more and more, and I don't care if it's cocaine or cash. We tend to go to extremes. Now that is part of our fallen nature. We have a tendency towards sin. We have a tendency to go too far with things. We have a tendency not to be well balanced, not to act in accordance with right reason. I remember one night in Hollywood. I was at a birthday party in the Hollywood Hills. A comedian named John Belushi was there, and I won't mention any other names but that, but there were many movie stars, rock stars there, well-known people. I remember I talked with some of them. Of course, earlier the next morning, John Belushi would die. His addiction killed him. These people I knew were not street people. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were musicians, movie stars, one professional football player who also died not long after that. Honestly, when I was at the height of my worldly success, this happened. I walked into my doctor's office, my physician, for a checkup. We talked. We were cordial. He was a man around 60. It was Friday afternoon in Los Angeles in the late 1970s. Everyone was prosperous. The economy was going well. Some of us were making big bucks. And everybody was looking to party. Friday came, that's what you did. The doctor, when he finished, said, well, he said, you want to relax for a while? Okay, he takes a mirror out of his desk with a little pile of cocaine on it. That's a different kind of prescription. Prescription for death. Another time I went to see my lawyer. Same thing. Another time I went to see my accountant. Same thing. Another time I was at a restaurant with a group of people on our way to a concert. And somebody, feeling stupid, took out a mirror, put cocaine on the table, and people started doing it, and in walks two cops. And they smiled, said, mind if we do a little? My last year in Los Angeles, 12 people I knew died from drugs, heart attacks caused by cocaine, suicide, because what goes up must come down, and sometimes it comes down hard, very hard. I remember going on for days. You see, the difference between street people that's smoking crack and the kind of people I knew and the kind of people I was that we had enough money to kill ourselves fast. The poorer people, they kill themselves slow because they don't have enough money normally to do it all at once. We had more than enough money to go up in a puff of smoke in one binge. I have watched 14, 15-year-old children die miserable deaths because of it. I have seen intelligent people, educated people, brilliant people. I know a Beverly Hills physician who ended up homeless and in the street, panhandling for change so he could get a hit of crack. It doesn't discriminate. Addiction is an equal opportunity employer. Addiction doesn't care if you're white or black, red or yellow. Addiction doesn't care what your religion is, doesn't care where you started, but it doesn't care about where you end. And it's always bad. if you don't get out of it. But why do people become slaves in the very name of freedom? Why do we become absolute slaves of some horrible thing and say, but I want to be free, I want to be me. I got to do whatever I want to do. If I want to hit that pipe, I'm going to do it. If I want to smoke that joint, I'm going to do it. I want to take that drink, I'm going to do that. I want to get that pornography, I'm going to do that. I want to spend the rent money on gambling, I'm going to do that. I got to be free. And you become a slave. And Satan is a very cruel master. Make no mistake about it. Many a long, cold, hard night, I was up with people who should have known better. We were intelligent. We were educated. I was a good kid. Grew up in a small town, never did anything wrong. I went to college. I served my country in the military, received an honorable discharge, and tried to do everything right. I was just like everybody else. I went the way most people went. I was a product of the 60s, you know, the rebellious generation, that time when we had to be free, had to be me. And gradually freedom slipped away. Sin sickens you. Jesus, eternal truth, said, the man who sins becomes the slave of sin. And if you want a biblical text to meditate on and to work with concerning addiction, there it is. The man who sins becomes the slave of sin. One time a young man said to me, now, Father, it says in the Bible that everything is good, that God did not create anything evil, that even all drugs are good. And it does say that, by the way. He said, and nothing wrong with me smoking some reefer or snorting some cocaine, because it says in the Bible, all things God created are good. There's not a harmful drug in creation. What you got to say to that? The kid wasn't stupid. He was pretty smart, but not smart enough. I says, that's right, it says that, but you know what it means. He says, no. I said, you know what they used cocaine for in the beginning? They used it for delicate eye surgery because it dulls the reflex to blink. Is that bad? No, that's good. That's a legitimate use. That's called the use, the legitimate use of something in creation. Gasoline isn't bad. It runs things, make motors go, right? Don't you drink a gallon of it. Use it, don't abuse it. There's a difference. What happens, though? The roots of addiction. What are the roots of addiction? I don't know for sure. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I can only talk to you as someone who went to the dark side, lived there for a long time, lived through it, came back to the other side, and can now talk about it. Sadness. A great sadness. Defeatism, dejection, discouragement, despondency, and ultimately despair. Alcohol doesn't have to be bad. Jesus probably drank some wine, and so did the apostles. That night in Cana, maybe they drank quite a bit. They ran out. Somebody did. But it doesn't have to be bad. Many things in themselves are not intrinsically evil, but when misused, can become terribly evil. They can become the instruments of torture. They can destroy hearts and minds. They can destroy families, indeed even nations. I have watched, well, I guess you really can only know how bad alcohol and drugs are if you live with it. You can read about it in the papers, but unless you have lived in the same house with someone who is enslaved to alcohol or drugs or gambling or pornography, you can't quite fathom it. You just have to wonder, or you can believe it, but I tell you, it's a pain beyond imagination. My poor mother suffered 20 years. Now, I wasn't a drug addict 20 years, just maybe 3 years. But you see, it didn't happen all at once. Sin doesn't get you all at once. It's gradual. Oh, I don't know when it started. Maybe when I was a boy, I told a lie. I don't remember. And then maybe I told another bigger lie. Maybe I don't remember stealing anything. But then maybe I went someplace I shouldn't have. My mother said, "Don't you go to that party." And I went and lied about it. By the time I was 15, now you going to church this morning? What mass you going to? Oh, I'm going to go to 9 o'clock. And I go to pool hall. I did. I went to pool hall. I shot pool, gambled, shooting pool. A little bit later, you maybe start adding a little alcohol, drinking while you're gambling. And then, of course, there's always sex. People are easily addicted to sex. That's one of the biggest addictions we have. Why? It's so natural. It's built right into human nature. There's a natural attraction that, now, once again, sex, nothing evil about sex. That's a gift from God. And in its proper context, why, it's an entrance into the very power of God, where man and woman together sacramentally enter into God's sanctuary, the sanctuary of God's creative power. And they collaborate with God in bringing life into being. Oh, it's a great thing. It's a noble gift. But when abused, it becomes a weapon for evil. It becomes chains and shackles, and it binds you to the earth. It takes away your freedom and makes you slaves. It takes your nobility as a child of God and tramples it in the dust. One time in Los Angeles, I had a friend who was a police detective, and every once in a while, he'd take me out with him cruising around in Los Angeles and Hollywood. And one time they got a call to go to a particular address. It was an alley in Hollywood, back of a club. And I'll never forget it. We went in and we were the first ones there. There was a 14-year-old girl dead in a dumpster. She'd been killed by her pimp, 14. She was a heroin addict, 14. She'd run away from home in the Midwest when she was 11. Abusive parents, they were alcoholics and drug addicts. She was sexually abused, ran away. Was a good-looking girl, thought maybe she could get into the movies. Yeah, right. And somebody was waiting for her right at the bus station and was real nice to her for an hour. Got her hooked on heroin. Turned her out in the street. And when I met up with her, she was dead in a garbage can. Don't you ever forget that where Satan wants your children is dead in a garbage can. Where addiction leads is dead in a garbage can, whether literally or figuratively. Death is where it ends. And don't you ever make a mistake about who the author of addiction is. You can talk about it in sociological terms. You can phrase it in psychological terms. You can take it and turn it this way and that way. But in the end, what you're going to face, if you want to face reality, is that the author of addiction is the devil. And I'm not talking metaphorically. I mean it, literally. And anyone who has been there and done that knows what I'm talking about. I have talked to people, street people, prostitutes, people addicted to all kinds of things. They all believe in the devil. And we sophisticated, educated, pseudo-religious people often don't. I remember the first time I ever preached at a conference, right out of college, or the university. And there was a somewhat eminent liberal theologian preaching there. I might have told you the story before. I like it, so I'm going to tell it again. And he was the main speaker. And he was a very liberal theologian. And his talk was going on like this. Well, now you know, we don't really believe in angels anymore, because angel is what we call a literary device in sacred scripture. And a literary device is something that's used in scripture to illustrate something, make a point, but it's not literal, it's not real. It's just a literary device. And the devil and the demons, well, that's the same thing. There's no such thing as personified evil. They're not real creatures. You have to understand. And purgatory, look, you got to stop that medieval theology stuff. Purgatory's not real. What God could ever require any suffering? In hell? Oh, come on. A God of love that could have a hell? It was going on. And there's an old lady sitting in the front row. And that old lady had reached that point where she didn't care. And about the time he was saying, and oh yeah, and angels are merely literary devices, she turned to her friend and said, I wish one of them there literary devices come down and kick his butt. And he went on and on. Finally, he came down and he sat down right next to the elderly woman. And she couldn't hardly stand it. And she's looking at him. Finally, she leaned over and said, Father, you don't believe in hell? I said, oh, no. He said, well, you're going to believe it when you get there. Now, she was a better theologian than him. And so a lot of educated, pseudo-educated people who think they're educated really aren't. Now, there are, believe it or not, a number of so-called Catholic theologians who don't believe in those things I just told you about. That guy was not that unusual. They don't believe in these things. But I'll guarantee you, every prostitute, every drug addict and alcoholic in the street who's been around a little bit, they believe because they've experienced evil. They've experienced the dark side. It hasn't maybe finished them off yet, but they've rubbed elbows with the devil for quite some time. Addiction is something which the enemy uses as a major weapon today. Now, when I was in the Army, they taught us about weapons. They taught us about tactics. They taught us about strategy. Now, we are at war, and our battle is not against flesh and blood. You better know about these things. You must know about these things. Addiction is one of the major weapons of the enemy. Now, can you imagine if you are in a pitched battle with an enemy, and you could do something, let's say you're in a hand-to-hand combat with a big, strong man, and you can feed him some poison or something that will make him so weak that he can't even lift up his arms. He doesn't have the freedom to even lift up his arms. And you can give him something that'll hurt his respiration so much that he's out of breath without even taking a step. He's lost the freedom to move. He's lost the freedom to resist. He's lost the freedom to fight. He's a goner. He's dead meat. You're going to whip him without even trying. That's addiction. It is one of the major ways the devil takes the fight out of the children of God. Oh, yes, you can be addicted to all kinds of things. Do you know why a lot of us are not resisting some of the most obvious evils today? Because we're addicted to those evils. Some of us, well, the devil's got something on us and holds us shackled because of it. I remember one time, way back, right after my reconversion, I went to a priest and I said, Father, I feel called to the priesthood. Now, I knew when I made my confession, bless me, Father, it's been 20 years, I knew at that confession I was called to be a priest. But in discerning it further, I would try to get advice, and I talked to priests, and I, in confession, told him my background. I told him where I've been. And he said, you can never be a priest. He can never be a priest because the devil one day will use that against you. He'll bring that up. He will bring it out, the horrible things you did. And in the first place, you are addicted to a drug that you could never be a priest. In the second place, it led you right into a mental institution, and so you couldn't do it based on that. And he gave me about a dozen reasons why there's no possible way that I could be a priest. And the devil had me convinced at that moment that I was just having delusions of grandeur and there was no possible way. Who am I kidding? I couldn't possibly be a priest. And I'll never forget it, after Mass, a young woman, she could very well be the kind of people you are. You know, after Mass, she came up and handed me a book and said, Our Lady wants you to have this book. Now, I do not promote any private revelations. I'm not against them, don't get me wrong, but I don't take a stand on any of them. I don't promote any of them. I'm a priest who teaches the faith. I'm basically a preacher and teacher of the faith. I have a doctorate in theology. I have to have a certain credibility. And so I can't align myself with unapproved private revelations. And I don't, and I'm not. But she handed me a book, said, Our Lady wants you to have the book. I didn't know what that book was. I took it home. And by now, I was trying to think, what on earth am I going to do? Because I didn't feel I could even be a janitor. Literally. I mean, everything had been taken out of me. I didn't have any ability to do anything. I had no motivation. I was so emotionally bankrupt, so physically just destroyed, and not spiritually built up enough yet to have any strength. So I just believed that there's no way I could be a priest. My addictions had ruined me. And it looked like there was no way, and I opened the book, and I don't remember what it said. I read one sentence, and it was like chains fell off and rattled to the floor. You know, Our Lady was saying something to somebody, to Father Gobi, and it was like, what a liar, that stinking devil. What a liar. And just like that, I was confirmed in my vocation. And I went on, and, well, of course, here I am. But it's a violent, violent, moral, spiritual combat. Addictions, in all their diverse forms, are a major weapon of the enemy in this combat for soul. If you want to get a dim intimation of how horrible addiction is, there's some people in here who know about it. They know about it just as much as I know about it. You might talk to one of them. You might find out. They can tell you what it's like to live in the house with somebody like that. I remember, I could tell you stories. I never went anywhere without a gun for years in Los Angeles. I carried a .44 Magnum between the seats of my Ferrari. One night, coming home from a party, a man jumped out of the bushes. He jumped in my car. He had a big butcher knife. And the gun came up, and he just hit his head on it. And his exact words were, "Oops, I made a mistake." Another time I met a famous singer. She's a recording star. Her father had been a famous recording star, and we went to a party. I followed her up into the Hollywood Hills. And I noticed, I always had eyes in the back of my head, I noticed there was 3 cars pulled out from the shadows and followed me. We turned around a bunch of streets way up in the hill. They're still following me. And I said, what is this? It could be, I don't know what, robbery, a drug ripoff, I don't know. She pulled in the driveway of the mansion where we were going. The car speeded up and came right up alongside me. I had my hand on that gun. It was coming up, and the guy showed a badge. I was that close. And the Los Angeles police in those days was mighty quick on the trigger. I would have been history. I could tell you 50 stories like that. I could tell you about the time I was in a Ferrari with another actress on my way to Las Vegas, Friday afternoon, going 150 miles an hour. And the highway patrol clocked me going 150 miles an hour. And I didn't know they were back there. They were chasing me. They couldn't quite catch up. So they set up a roadblock. And I had to stop, and I had 6 ounces of pure cocaine in a briefcase in my trunk. That's more than enough to send you to the big house for 25 years. And I figured, this is it. Kiss it goodbye. And I had, of course, the gun between the seats of the car, and that'll get you even more time, even back then. This actress, she's still famous today. She's around. She's in there, and she was recognizable even in those days. I said, get out of the car, please. And they said, would you please open up the hood? And I said, and I'm thinking, the only thing I can think about is open up the trunk. And they said, open up the hood. The hood, oh, the front. Okay. And a bunch of cops are standing around perusing my engine. And they begin to ask me, is this fuel injected? How many horsepower does this thing have? Man, you was going fast. And I'm beginning to think, what's happening here? And in the end, the chief cop smiles at me and says, well, now you better be careful. I don't want you driving fast like that anymore. Now you go ahead and you go on and have a good time. And I could tell you 50 stories like that. Now, I was a criminal. I was a criminal worse than many criminals in prison. I was an addict. What was I addicted to? I wouldn't even want to tell you everything I was addicted to, but I was addicted to drugs, cocaine especially, freebasing cocaine. A major musician taught me how to do that. Now, I don't want to mention names. You'd know it in an instant if I told you, though. I remember the night it started. He said, you ever do this? I said, no. He said, well, he said, I'd show you how to do it, but you'll hate me for the rest of my life. I said, that's okay. And that's where it began. 12 people that I knew in 1 year died. Well-to-do people, doctors and lawyers, professional athletes, musicians, actors and actresses, dead, gone. Alcohol destroyed families. I watched it destroy priests. I watched a priest walk out on the altar and fall down dead drunk. And he used to do it regularly. And that was in the old days, not recently. I went to a parish on a mission, I won't say when. After I gave my testimony, an elderly priest came up to me and he said, Father, you and I got something in common. And there's a bunch of people around. I said, we do, Father? He says, yeah, we got something in common. I said, well, what is that? He said, la cocaína. He was a cocaine addict. I don't know, he must have been 70. And in tears, he told me he was a good priest. Can you understand that a person can be enslaved to a horrible addiction and yet have a good heart and do good things? This man was one of the best priests anybody knew of. They didn't know that, but I did, because he told me. Another place, and this has happened many times, the priest addicted to alcohol, enslaved to it, told me in tears he would do anything to stop, but he didn't have the power. More than one, not just priests, but everybody to tell me pornography. Pornography is a terrible scourge today. You can get it anywhere, off the internet, anything you want, as horrible as you want. It's destroying the country and the world. It eats minds away. Gambling, legal a lot of places. Most people can handle it. Some people can't. You know what it's like when dad and mom get in an argument because daddy lost the rent money on the horses and started drinking and came home drunk. It's hell. Addiction. From A to Z, left to right, north to south, east to west. Addiction is eating our country alive. It is a loss of power. It is a loss of freedom. And the only thing we can do is do what Jesus said. Abide in his word. Virtue. Good acts. Repeated. You've got to do violence to yourself until you want it bad enough. You're not going to break it. And so what do I suggest? Radical action. Number one, the Rosary and Our Lady. Number two, the Eucharist. And number three, ask for help. You keep me alive. I have often said and mean it, it ain't over till it's over. I hope you never read in the newspapers I ended up dead in a crack house somewhere. But don't you think it couldn't happen? And so you pray for me, and I'll pray for you, and we'll pray for all our brothers and sisters in the Lord, and we will break the shackles. We'll break the shackles of addiction and give glory to God now and for all eternity. Amen. God bless you.